Planet Earth, or Bharatavarsha, one of the planets in the intermediary system. This is a place where the inhabitants experience a mixture of conditions from higher and lower planets. There is heat, but there is also cold. There is happiness, but there is also suffering. There is goodness, but there is also cruelty. There is love, and there is hate. There is peace, but there is also war. This is a world of extremes where we have contact with both good and bad, a place of duality. This is the place we are now. In the previous video, we explored the descending path a soul may take when he first enters in the material sphere. We can observe that this descending trip is connected with how much one becomes involved with matter, an association that leads to ambitions and desires. The soul is originally pure, but as one goes downwards inside the material universe, he becomes progressively more involved with lower qualities, like lust, anger, and greed. This degrades one's consciousness and makes him go progressively deep in the sequence of different planetary systems. This continues to a certain point where he again comes in contact with spiritual knowledge, be it through a book, a friend, or a spiritual teacher, and decides to start his way back, this time progressing back to higher levels of consciousness. Our planet is described in the Vedas as Karma Kshetra, a place where souls that exhaust their past karma go to execute different activities and thus create a new baggage of karma that is going to determine their next destination. In other words, this planet is a kind of a cosmic crossroads, and the decisions we make here are going to have long-lasting implications. Being a place where we have a difficult life, where we need to work very hard for any small amount of material success, this planet is considered an ideal place to cultivate spiritual knowledge and follow the path of self-realization. Different from the heavenly planets, where there is too much distraction, from the earth a soul can go to any other material planet, from the heavenly Swargaloka all the way to Brahmaloka, the topmost planet of the material universe, or attain liberation, going back home and reattaining his original position in the spiritual planets. However, there is also a great danger. The ones that misuse the opportunity becomes more and more materialistic. These continue their way down, going thus to the lower planets, where people are just after material comforts, and there is little opportunity for self-realization. This part of the universe is described in the Srimad Bhagavatam as a dark hole, because once one enters there, it's difficult to come out. The lower planets are described as being situated lower than Earth in the cosmic structure. All of them are subterraneous realms where the natural light of the sun doesn't enter. The inhabitants live underground in a perpetual night, depending on different arrangements of artificial lights. Materialists that are very pious have the opportunity of taking birth in the Bilaswarga, heavenly lower planets where the inhabitants live in comfort, surrounded by material facilities, in cities created by the great architect Mayadanava. In terms of standard of living, the inhabitants of these planets don't live much differently from the inhabitants of Swargaloka. The main difference is that in Swargaloka the inhabitants are God-conscious, and thus they have the opportunity of progressing to higher realms, be it directly or after a stop on Earth. The inhabitants of lower heavenly planets, however, are atheists. The law of karma doesn't discriminate between the two classes, and thus they are able to enjoy a similar standard of living as long as they remain pious. The problem is that without good association, they tend to gradually lose their piety and thus sink into the lower levels. Materialists that are less pious take birth in the intermediary lower planets. These are technologically advanced realms. However, different from the higher planets, there is a lot of anxiety in these places, with lots of pressure and competition. Not all have the same opportunities, and everyone struggles to be on top of the other. It's a standard of life that is similar to the way people live in most big cities nowadays. In these realms, the inhabitants live completely artificial lives, disconnected from nature. On some of these planets, people are very much addicted to sex, and the ones that fall there are exploited with this purpose. Not exactly a good place to go, despite the material facilities. The same way there are pathways that connect our planet with the celestial planets, there are also pathways that connect our planet with these lower realms. This allows the inhabitants of these lower spheres to sometimes visit our planet. The interactions of humans with such beings are, however, not the most positive ones. Infused with pride and superiority concept, these beings just see human beings as guinea pigs, a race to exploit. Fortunately, higher universal forces limit their actions in our level. Materialists that are impious, too much affected by lower qualities, take birth in the lowest planets. There's where things start to become quite dark. These planets offer progressively poorer living standards, more anxiety, and less peace of mind. The mentality of the inhabitants is progressively lower, and more lust, anger, and violence are present. The lowest of these planets are dark places where gigantic intelligent snakes live in holes. Envious and violent, they live disturbed lives, where the weaker serpents fear the stronger, and they all fear other beings that regularly devour them. Sometimes these reptilians manage to visit our planet, and the experiences human beings have in their hands are not the most pleasant. Finally, there are the hellish planets, places where people that commit serious crimes go specifically to pay for the violence they committed to other living beings. Souls that arrive there listing why all their wrongdoings are described by Yamaraj and sentenced to different levels of punishment according to the severity of their crimes. It's described that one that lives by killing animals, for example, has his body pierced by the horns and teeth of the same animals he killed, and the ones that live lives centered around promiscuous sexual relationships have to embrace head-hot metal forms of the opposite sex. Persons that imprison and torture animals have to live in caves where they are tortured by hellish beings. It's not a place one would like to go. Hellish planets are at the bottom of the universe. From there is no further way down. A soul that reaches this level has, after paying for his crimes, the opportunity to again take birth in this earth or other intermediary planet, usually as a plant or animal, according to his consciousness, and from there slowly progress in the karmic evolutive process until he again take birth as a human being, a position where he again has the choice of going up or going down. To take birth as a human being on Earth is considered very fortunate, because here one has the chance of meeting one of the spiritual teachers that propagate transcendental knowledge and thus start his way up back to the spiritual realm. It's easier to take the wrong choices and follow the path of materialism and sense indulgence, instead of taking the path of self-realization that demands discipline. That's why most souls end up staying in the material sphere for a very long time, going up and down in the cycle of samsara. It's like investing money. One that has a certain capital may invest his money and multiply it by making the right choices. This is going to bring him yet more money that will multiply his opportunities for investments, up to the point he may become a billionaire. However, one that just spends his money in a decadent life will eventually spend everything. He may then keep his artificial living standard for some more time by making debts, but eventually his credit will dry out and he will have no other alternatives apart from doing hard work to pay for his debts, and from there start again from the bottom. Similarly, in your current life, we have the choice of cultivating spiritual knowledge and self-control, and thus create a brilliant path for ourselves by following the spiritual path, which will allow us to take birth in the higher planets or to attain liberation. Or we may surrender to carnal desires and abuse the opportunity, creating a path that may not be so pleasant. That's the beauty and the danger of human life. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is mentioned that which in the beginning may be just like poison, but at the end is just like nectar, and which awakens one to self-realization, is said to be happiness in the mode of goodness. The material path involves instant gratification of one's senses, thus it is a path that is pleasurable in the beginning, but painful in the long run. The path of progress, on the other hand, involves discipline and restraint. One that is studying to pass a test and enter into a good university, for example, has to renounce many things he would otherwise want to do, and instead pass days and nights immersed in his studies. However, this allows him to achieve a much better position in the future. Similarly, the path of self-realization involves working with our bad habits, vices, and lower qualities. Therefore, it is a path that may present certain challenges in the beginning, but will bring us the most sublime results in the end. To be notified when the next videos come, subscribe and click on the bell button. If you are appreciating these videos, don't forget to like and share. If you have any question, comment or curiosity, use the comments. I will be answering them for some time. See you in the next video.